Sorry.
Is fine. This is going to be fine.
This beautiful old railroad was first constructed back in 1869. That means this year we are exactly 154 years old. No, this is not the original crew. Almost half those people are dead. Sit. Please sit. Thank you. No more standing or we have to stop the train. The Bank of California had no choice. They had to build this railroad because they simply had repossessed too many mines. Now they had to have a way to get the ore from those mines down to the Carson River Canyon, because that's where they also owned the only hydraulic stamp mills or reduction mills. They had such a strong financial stranglehold on everything going on up here, nobody liked them. Everybody owed them money. That's probably why nobody liked them. Right now I'm pointing off to my left. We're going to call that side east. 500 yards to the east, you're going to see a huge pile of dirt. It's a dead giveaway. It's a very deep mine. They started digging it in 1875. They called it the Combination Mine because it was a joint venture of 3 individual companies. They worked in that mine together for 10 years. That's a lie. They didn't work together for 10 minutes. There was so much contention and lack of cooperation, it became a huge financial bust for each one of those 3 companies. Every single day they had to pump 4 million gallons of water out of it. Every mine up here had water in it. When they abandoned the Combination Mine, they were only 30 feet short of being the deepest mine shaft in the world. 3,265 feet. The day they quit pumping water, 24 hours later, 18 million gallons had flowed back into it. Now it was the most expensive, deepest, totally useless well on the Comstock. The steel building there to the east is the Comstock Gold Mill, the very last mill built. Here comes a little wooden trestle. We actually had to straighten this up. It was starting to lean in a little bit too close. The trestle was built here because there were mines on both sides of these tracks, and this allowed the miners to push their little hand cars right over to the center and then dump them into the open cars of the VNT mill. 2 superintendents working right there were John Mackey and James Fair. They went uptown and they very quietly began purchasing old abandoned mines all around the Consolidated Virginia mine. And that's where exactly 35 days later they would discover what everybody would call the Big Bonanza. They found a ledge of silver ore 40 feet thick, set a world record. It's never been broken. At the time, silver was assaying at about $8 a ton, but overnight the price skyrocketed to almost $1,200. Not because of this strike necessarily, but at that exact same moment in time, countries all over the world were very quickly moving away from the Deutschmark, or the gold standard, and they were all opting for silver as the basis of their monetary systems. You guys remember when our dollar bills used to say silver certificate on the bottom? Now there's something written on there, but I'm pretty sure it's Chinese. Because of all that activity, John Mackey became one of the wealthiest men in the world, and he later became very, very influential in the construction of both the transatlantic and trans-Pacific cable lines. He and his wife Marie were not typical millionaires. They did an awful lot of good with their money. They built hospitals, schools, parks, libraries, and they were pretty amazing. Right over here is where our yard is, and that's exactly where it was 154 years ago. Take a good look at those three green Holden coach cars, because they're now Hollywood famous. We're just passing a little hole in the ground. It's kind of uncomfortably close to our tracks. That little hole is 1,800 feet deep. It's the Julia mine. They named that in honor of Julia Boulay, who of course was one of the first and actually one of a small handful of ladies of the evening up here. Unfortunately, she met a very untimely demise. No more moving, okay? No more, or we'll stop the train. The little coward that did her in was caught 3 days later. Of course, all of her jewelry was gone and all of her money was gone. Well, they dragged him uptown, gave him a very fair trial. It took over 8 minutes. And then they hung him at Piper's Opera House. Virginia City waited 8 weeks to have her funeral because dignitaries and heads of state from all over the world that had known her wanted to come back and pay their last respects. All of the newspaper accounts at the time said it was an extraordinary week to be up here on the Comstock. Right now we're in the middle of tunnel number 5. Well, as you can tell, this is no longer a tunnel. When the highway department was building the truck route, they came through and they dynamited the roof off this tunnel, and then they put in that little permanent steel crossing. The truck route's going to be that highway you see all the way across to the east. That's Nevada State Route 341. Every single year we close that for 2 days and we have a car race. The event is called the Virginia City Hill Climb, and it's always very well attended by, usually even sponsored by, the Ferrari Car Club of America. Right here on both sides of our tracks we have 2 of our state trees. We actually have 3 state trees. The bristlecone pine is one of them, but they're all way over on the east side of the state. Here we have our pinyon pines and our mountain junipers. These pinyon pines used to offer up the staple for both the Washoe and Paiute Indian diets in the form of pine nuts. Anybody tell me what we still make with pine nuts? I heard it. Pesto, yeah. Why do we harvest juniper berries? What do we get? Gin. You were close. Okay, now I'm going to try very hard to adequately describe what life was like for a miner. Ready? Horrible. Every mine of any depth at all had air temperatures of 140, and they all had water. The water temperature was 190. These guys could only work 15 minutes, and then they'd have to stop because they were starting to just slump. If they were lucky, somebody would throw some water on them, and then they'd go right back to work, because at the end of the shift, they were going to be paid $4. Made them the highest paid miners in the world. $1 would pay for their room for a week. A quarter would get them a gallon of old tough whiskey. That was part of the original Jim Beam brand. 10 cents got them a fresh hot bath once a week. Another thing that 10 cents would get them, out here in the Wild West there was an elixir, and it was called laudanum. For 10 cents, you'd get a little half-pint bottle, and laudanum was made up of 90% alcohol and 10% opium, and why the hell doesn't CVS still sell that? I'd be more than willing to stand in line waiting for one of those 3-foot receipts if I was going to walk out with some laudanum. By the way, right over here on the side of the hill, this is our solution to the people that won't remain seated. We're going to enter our second tunnel of the day. Actually, this is our first real tunnel. This is tunnel number 4. That confuses me until about mid-June. This tunnel is 417 feet long. It's not our longest. Tunnel number 2 in American Flat is 600 feet long. There's just enough curvature in the track of Tunnel 2. When you're right in the middle of it, you cannot see that proverbial light that you were into the tunnel. Now, here's a fun fact about this tunnel. 2 years ago, we discovered this had become the home to a bobcat and 2 very small cubs. We just saw that family about a month ago. Those cubs are now huge. It's real no reason for keeping your hands inside these cars. As we come out of the tunnel, right over here to the west, running right alongside us, we're going to see a little dirt road. That's part of the original wagon toll road up to Virginia City. That's how the big freight wagons and stagecoaches used to come and go. Last summer I had a real nice family visiting from New York City, and I pointed out that road and the lady just started shaking her head. I finally had to ask her why. She said, well, I don't believe a horse would ever go up anything that steep. And I said, well, yes, ma'am, they did. And they pulled freight wagons and stagecoaches. She kept shaking her head. Well, I wasn't going to argue with her, but I instantly knew they don't have anything like that in the middle of Central Park. We're going to go past Tunnel 3. We'll never go through it. The ground above the tunnel and even underneath the tracks is just too unstable. It was a nightmare for the original B&T, and they ran 50 trains a day through there. Each time they'd have to stop and the crew would run in and shovel everything out of the way. That is why we're never going to go through that tunnel. That's why we're now on a permanent detour, or shoe fly as they call it. Now the good news is, this little shoe fly allows us to work our way right down into Gold Hill. There's still some prominent buildings you're going to see down there. The first one you're going to notice is the long, sloping steel roof of the Crown Point Mill. It sits directly under the Crown Point mine. The Gold Hill Hotel and Saloon down there is one of the finest of the West, and that is actually the oldest hotel in continuous operation in the state of Nevada. They opened in 1861. That's exactly 3 years before Nevada was Nevada. The last building in the block down there is where the Bank of California was. The boys of the bank, after 3 months in completing this railroad, enjoyed a profit of $400,000 every single month. In today's money, that would only be $78 million. That's a profitable little railroad. You're going to see a little bell here in just a minute, and it used to hang above the Liberty Firehouse that was located right here. This is actually a monument to all those firefighters. I'm going to have a trick question for you in just a minute. There's one of our wild horses right there to the east. Should say west. No, it's still east. Anybody want to guess what happened to the firehouse? No, that would have been a much greater story. Actually, one day high winds just blew it over. We had to come down last Thursday and trim all of these trees and bushes. They'd grown so close they were actually slapping you as we went by. I got to admit, a lesser man than myself would have gotten a kick out of that. Right up there over your shoulders are where the very first major gold discoveries were made back in 1863. That's how the whole area became known as Gold Hill. While the miners were desperately searching for that gold, they kept having to work through that thick blue mud. It was a mess. It destroyed their boots and some of their tools. They kept just shoveling it out of their way, and then they noticed as it dried out, it became almost as solid as concrete, so they started taking it uptown. And and they were patching potholes in the streets. And then one day, some much more experienced Mexican miners came through here. They looked at that mud that was being thrown away, and I'm pretty sure they probably started to giggle just a little bit. One of them pointed down to it, and he said, "Mucho plata." Now this is word for word what that translates to. Why are you morons throwing away that valuable silver ore? I think it's word for word. What do you think happened late that night? The potholes began to reappear. And we're going to stop here for just a minute. I'm going to find out a couple of the most famous mines down here. As a matter of fact, we just passed one. Now that we've stopped, you can certainly still. He's averaging $500 a day in gold. And he still works full time here. Guys, either an insomniac or what? I don't know what. By 1948, the D&T was no longer the money printing machine that it had been, and so they started selling up everything. They sold the equipment, they sold tracks, they sold this thing to Story County for $1. We use it for a lot of different things. There's company parties in there, dinner parties, for our candy cane trees. This becomes Santa's toy shop, and the elves are outside flipping toys. And Santa comes out when we stop, and he meets every one of your kids by their first name. That's what I do. Just a minute, right there in that field in front of us. This car had 87 retired Marine veterans, men and women. You should have heard the hoorah on that. That was just amazing. Our most famous locomotive has to be the number 29 Steam. Couldn't quite see it because there's another caboose similar to this right on the back. Not too long ago, we sent that number 29 and those 3 coach cars that I pointed out to Pawhuska, Oklahoma, so they could all star in a Martin Scorsese movie. The name of that movie is Killers of the Flower Moon, and it stars Leonardo DiCaprio, Robert De Niro, and Emma Gladstone. And it's going to debut in theaters next month. We're planning some real special trains because of that for October. Now in a minute, we're going to go back to Tunnel 4. When we follow the diesel through there, it's a walk in the mud. When we follow the steam locomotive, it's totally different. First of all, it's very, very hot, very humid, really smoky. Last summer, we had 2 horrible forest fires, and that made even more smoke. We had days where it was unbearable here. I told everybody, I guess we're lucky we're in a pandemic. At least you don't have a mask to put on. Of course, you don't have to do it today because we're using the diesel. We have a lot of fun with this little tunnel. For the holiday trains, we put so much neon lighting in there, it actually scares the bobcats out for 3 weeks. The We watched them do a bunch of helicopter surveys last fall. They had a way of getting the imagery of whatever the minerals were done. It looked like they were just open, great big old rectangle made out of PVC pipe. But they absolutely are going to get it open. It's a little bit more difficult now because of the ocean. The old days you could just drop miners in there and throw them a shovel. Now it's going to be a little bit. Personally, my favorite mine of all of these is right up at the end of the ravine. It was named in honor of Emily Ward, who was a very famous stage actress. So they called this the Ward Bullion Mine. They dug it for 3 solid years, never found 1 ounce of valuable ore, much less bullion. The only reason they kept digging is because that way they could keep selling totally worthless mining stuff. Everybody did. It's the most popular game on the mountain. Stock manipulation and stock fraud actually is what broke San Francisco. Now the bad news is that stock fraud also took away an awful lot of life savings and very hardworking people. The state of Nevada had seen enough. They stepped in and began to enact some of the strongest mining laws of the nation. They should have done it earlier. These guys are all a bunch of thieves. Right there with the big piles of dirt around, that's the Ward Mine. And what looks like a little rock wall at the end of it, that was actually the foundation for the hoist of the headland. Those people you see standing up there, some of the friendliest people I've ever met. They came up here last summer and they built those corrals. Then later they built those little tack sheds. They went back down to southern Nevada around Beatty and rounded up a handful of those wild girls and brought them back. Later they brought in the 2 big donkeys. I hope you can see those donkeys. They have a Jack and a Jenny. The Jack stud donkey over there is 17 hands high. It's the biggest donkey I've ever seen. A few months back, they had the donkeys out there walking up and down the right-of-way, and they told us they're trying to get them acclimated so they can offer wagon rides. Maybe later this fall. That'd be pretty cool. Coming back this direction, I think opens up the most panoramic view we still have of the Comstock. For example, over here, just above the locomotive to the west, you're going to see a huge Victorian-style building. They recently repainted it. Now it's a 2-tone color. And they painted the top 2 floors brick red. Makes it a little easier to spot it. That's the 4th Ward School, and it was one of the finest of the West. It more than rivaled anything that existed in Denver or San Francisco. It also was the first school this side of the Mississippi River to have indoor plumbing. Directly in front of us now is that beautiful old Catholic church, St. Mary's of the Mountains. She played a very important role in the history up here. In October of 1875, they had what everybody living here called the Great Fire. And it started early one morning, way up on the north end of town. Very quickly, high winds had a race in this direction. Just before it got to that church, everybody started begging with Bishop Patrick Manelli to use the church as a fire break, and he said, okay, but you have to rebuild it. And they did. The people of the church want you to know you're all invited inside to enjoy the beauty of it. They don't care what your religious beliefs are at all. If you need more incentive than that, they sell wine in the basement. Right up here on the hill behind us, we're going to see a big white sign. It says Collar Mine Tours. It's a great tour to take. 400 feet of it. Gives you a real good idea what the miners were up against. 200 years ago, when I was still in college, I used to bring busloads of kids up there, and at that time, they could go in at 500 feet. The good news is, it's a horizontal they kind of show up because of all that beer they start pouring around 7 a.m. in the morning. Never fails. Never fails. At the peak, the population of Virginia City was 30,000. Then just going down the hill, you get the Gold Hill where we were, and that had 10,000. And then the smallest city, if you happen to come up from Carson, the last one was Silver City. It had maybe 2,000. Over that hill was directly over the top of it, you see a little cone-shaped mountain. That's what it showed. In the old days, when you bought sugar, they came in a boat wrapped with parchment paper. That's why they call it. Sometimes I have to tell you that starts at 100 mile on a sunny day. I'm not even close to 100 miles. I'll tell you what, at sunset, it is a man. Those colors just pop. Last year, for the very first time, we actually had 4 wedding ceremonies on the train. Each time, the couples took their vows right back here at the end of this tunnel. A few of them wanted to use that backdrop for some of their wedding photos, and then we had a couple that went all the way down to Tunnel 3, got out right there where the grove of trees were, and actually had their first dance as a wedding. The best thing about all